Another historic name that was here and then disappeared for a while and then reappeared is the Plymouth House. It was a boarding house circa 1888, operated by Mrs. Catherine Riggs, and it continued with this name through 4 more owners until 1944. Then there was a period of time when the house changed over with some frequency over 54 years with 8 owners. And they tended to change the name based on who their family surname. So it had many different names during that period. And then it was renamed the Plymouth House circa 1996 when it was remodeled by Bill Maynor and Dick Swanson for rental. And it's continued to be known as the Plymouth House. So that was the resurrection of an historic name by the cottage owners. Now, I decided, since I was doing a presentation, I could do however I wanted. So I came up with a classification system. And what seemed more appropriate to me than the pillars of Lakeside? We're always talking about the pillars. So I've used the pillars as a kind of organizational framework in which to share approximately 75 cottage names with you. So we'll move pretty quickly. Religion. We all know that, as Kevin spoke even from the podium or the stage of Hoover this week, that religion is the foundation on which Chautauquas are based, and certainly this Chautauqua has held religion and faith and spirituality as a foundation through its 140-some years. So there are a number of cottages that reflect that. The Narrow Gate was purchased by Mary Beth and Peter Melville in 2010. It was actually their son who suggested the name. He had lived in an off-campus house at Miami University with fellow male college students, and they chose the name the Narrow Gate for their cottage, or for their off-campus house at Miami University. And he told his mother that he and his male roommates would be very happy if she would name the cottage after that off-campus building. I find that pretty amazing. So mother went with that based on the verse from Matthew, you can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. Now we have 2 with identical names, Almost Heaven, although the signs are very different. The one above, you can see some connection to Almost Heaven. I was unable to speak to either of these homeowner families, so I have no idea how the raccoons appeared in Almost Heaven. I know that at one time there were raccoons living in a nest in one of the trees on Perry Park, and this Plum Cottage faces Perry Park, but that's a story yet to be learned. And then we have 3 cottages actually that have the phrase Blue Heaven, and blue is the most common color referenced. Okay, so we have Blue Heaven, My Blue Heaven, and Our Blue Heaven. I've not talked to, if there's no information, that means I've been unable to make contact with those homeowners. So those are stories I still want to have for the archives. Heaven appears in 10 cottage names in the 2017 LPO directory. So if you got that right, I'll tell you right now in case you're wondering what the other one is. We'll get to it in a moment. But the other word is time, T-I-M-E. But here are the 10 references to cottage names with the word heaven. Those of you who are pondering a new name, if you want to be a little different, you might not want to use heaven. Still with the religion and faith classification, the Ricklofts named their cottage, purchased in '97, Amazing Grace. We all know the Christian hymn, Words by John Newton, published in 1779 for this wonderful hymn. Count Your Blessings is a cottage on Main owned by James and Colleen Braid. James is the concert master for the Lakeside Symphony Orchestra. His wife also, and his daughter, and his son-in-law play in the symphony. But they bought their cottage in 1997, went many years without a cottage name. And then in 1 year, Colleen told me she was treated for 2 major health issues, both involving extensive surgery, and later after those 2 issues was involved in a significant automobile accident. So it was following those 3 incidents in 1 year that they selected to name their cottage Count Your Blessings. Again, after a hymn, this one published in 1897. This is an interesting story that Sherry related to me. They purchased their cottage also in 1997 after 13 years of staying for 1 week in Hotel Lakeside. Finally, they decided they would purchase a lakeside cottage, and on the first weekend, as they were driving across the Sandusky Bay Bridge for their first weekend in their new cottage, the Quaker hymn Simple Gifts was playing on the radio. So that's how they immediately selected that for their name. 'Tis a gift to come down where you ought to be. Very fitting for a lakeside cottage name. There are 2 very similar cottage names. One is Simplify, the other one is Simplified. This one name was chosen by Thelma and Bill Tucker when they bought their cottage on Central, just right across from the South Auditorium in 2000. They came to see their daughter, who was here, and Thelma said by the end of the first day, they had a contract on this cottage. They are not people that are wishy-washy about making decisions. Bill died, and Thelma then made arrangements for her daughter and son-in-law to have the house, but she stays there on her visits to Lakeside. Hope House is on Sycamore near 5th Avenue. This sign is a little different. Boy, you see all kinds of signs when you pay attention. This is actually a small flag that is on a flag standard by the corner of the front porch. In 2015, when Mike and Laura bought this cottage, her grandmother Hope was seriously ill. So to honor her, they named this cottage Hope House. Perhaps one of the newest signs in Lakeside, this one went up just this spring for the first time, is Perry Peaceful on East 2nd Street, down near the East Gate. It overlooks Perry Park. Kim and John Moraldi purchased this Ross cottage in 2012, remodeled it extensively, and created an open 2nd level porch that juts out over the original Ross Cottage lower porch. It provides them great views of Lake Erie over Perry Park. I spoke to John this morning. I didn't ask him specifically. He just said Perry Park is so peaceful, probably except on Wednesday evenings when the family picnic is there. But by comparison to Central Park, it would be a much quieter place to spend an evening overlooking the lake. In the Garden was purchased by Becky and Randy Donathan in 2003. An interesting story. Her sister lived across the street on the corner, and Becky and her husband had been wanting to purchase a cottage. They lived in Arizona, and they were reluctant to try to get here, so they based their decision to buy based on Becky's sister's description and photographs of the building. They did not see it in person before they purchased it. They are both avid gardeners, and they were inspired by the hymn In the Garden that was a favorite of their grandfather, Bowman who bought the first Lakeside Cottage in 1947 when he came for Lutheran Chautauqua Week. So the connection is at least 4 or 5 generations now. And the two sisters live on opposite corners. Okay, we've covered religion as far as I am going to for today. You know, with over 400 cottage names, we're not doing them all today. So there are plenty more to cover at another time. But education is an important Chautauqua principle. John H. Vincent, who was the founder of the Lakeside, or the Chautauqua movement in 1874, wrote this sentence in the opening paragraph of his book, The Chautauqua Movement: "Education, once the privilege of the few, must become the valued possession of the many." And we have lots of cottages that reflect some aspect of nature. Birds, trees, flowers, etc. The Jenny Wren was actually the first cottage name that I knew. It was because my mother loved that name, the Jenny Wren, for this little cottage, and I always knew where to find the Jenny Wren. And so I think probably all of us can remember one cottage that we were just kind of smitten with the name early on and could find it no matter where we were in Lakeside. It was named circa 1930, and Joe Keener found the sign in the shed when they bought the cottage circa 1985, and he cleaned it up, and it has hung then since 1985. Jasmine has a cottage named Swallow's Nest, and I don't see Natalie here. I told her I would specifically name her and have her stand up if she was here. I stopped by this cottage this week to take a photo, and Grandma was outside, and I was asking Grandma, and Natalie, 12, who was sitting on the front porch, popped right up, came out, introduced herself, and took over for Grandma, explaining how the cottage got its name. It was very easy. The swallow nest is painted there with 4 little nestlings in the nest, if you can count them, for the 4 children in that family. Natalie is the oldest, she was proud to tell me. The tree house, we all know where the tree house is on Walnut. Vern and Diane Hartenberg purchased this cottage in 2005. Diane, did you select the name the first year, or you just heard so many people calling it the tree house it was a given?
You know, I was so happy to have a cottage, I didn't care what it was named. So he got to name it, I got the cottage.
And you can see that, not surprising, Vern has helped us all in terms of our educational knowledge of this tree by telling us the circumference is greater than 13 feet around, and the height is plus or minus 90 feet tall. So Vern's contributing to our educational knowledge of this ash tree, and we just hope it continues to live through the challenge of any old tree in Lakeside. Now we have another tree house in Lakeside. This one is Grandma and Grandpa's tree house. Pat and Gary Cook's 3-year-old grandson named this cottage. He is now, I believe, she told me 24 or 27. So it's been a long time. They live in a log cabin style cottage, and he told his parents that he wanted at age 3 to go visit Grandma and Grandpa's tree house. And Mother was just not in sync with the 3-year-old's view of the world. And you know, she said, "What are you talking about?" "Well, Grandma and Grandpa's tree house." "Well, I don't get, well, it's made of trees, Mother. It's a tree house." Can't you see a 3-year-old little boy stomping his feet almost at that? So again, we have the face of a raccoon sharing this sign. History and architecture in our cottage names. Dick Swanson bought this double cottage in 1984 on Sycamore and stored it specifically with the goal of renting it. He did some history searching at the archives, discovered that it had been the land and the cottage had been built by Reverend C.W. Taneyhill in 1880. So that's what he calls it, the Taneyhill. And Taneyhill was actually the Lakeside's manager immediately after Samuel R. Gill. He was here for the period of 1899 to 1904. There was some controversy about Taneyhill's administration, but he is forever remembered at Lakeside in this cottage name. The carriage house reflects a historic name and an interesting architectural building. Stephanie and Ron Leffler bought this structure on the west side of Ross Court, just west of Plum Avenue. It was built as a garage for the Ross Cottage that sat at 620 Lakefront. And so they've named it the Carriage House with its unique sign. Anyone who's been in Lakeside for